Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to another episode of The Intentional Way. I'm excited as your host here to introduce you to a guest that I've actually been anticipating this conversation for a few weeks, probably longer than that if I get into the nitty gritty, but excited about our conversation today. And it's a guest that I think we're going to learn a lot of cool things. Just the little bit that I've learned about her, I think that she is just going to be a powerhouse. Her name is Zvara, and she is a 20-year entrepreneur. She owns a company called Mother Trucker Yoga, and that is just fun in and of itself. I love that. And she also is a backyard gardening mother, and she's just awesome. So welcome to the show, Hope.
Thank you so much, Bryan, for having me on. This is a real treat. You were saying for yourself, but really it's for me because I've done hundreds of podcasts and radio shows in the last several years, but I don't do a lot on parenting because it's not my niche. But getting connected to you was such a pleasant surprise and perfect timing.
It's super nice to meet you in a deeper level here. And like I said, I've been anticipating this for a long time here. So tell us, how did you come to become Mother Trucker Yoga? I think that's a very interesting place to start. Let's go there first.
For me, trucking just kind of fell in my lap about 7 years ago, but really, that's not really where it started. I spent a big part of my teenage life and in my early 20s struggling with addiction, anxiety, depression, and really just looking for hope, looking for something to help me. And I don't want to say my family gave up on me, but they did everything they could possibly do. And I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure me out. And then one day I was a lifeguard for many years as a late teen. One of my colleagues looked at me randomly one day and said, "You look like someone that would practice yoga." And I live in a small town in southeastern Wisconsin, okay? Full disclosure, I think that was the first time I ever heard the word yoga. But something in me just snapped, and I went home and got on my dial-up internet. That's dating me a little bit, and found a class in a nearby town. That Wednesday night yoga class became my weekly ritual of second chances. And those second chances eventually rolled into me becoming a yoga teacher. I was in college then at the time and eventually just didn't go back. And then opened up a yoga studio and then a state-approved vocational school here in Wisconsin. Along the way, something amazing happened. I started to figure out me. I started to find myself whole again. And there's a saying that you come to the yoga mat raw, ready to face yourself. Yoga is like a mirror. And that was exactly what I needed, somewhere to be able to practice life. So then when I went out into life, I was able to use these skills like breathing and mindfulness and all this stuff people talk about, but I didn't know how to apply it. Yoga is kind of that 13th step for a lot of people like myself. And I was able to get into recovery, stay in recovery without medication, and now live, 10 years now plus after getting into recovery, happy, healthy. Do I dare say normal? I mean, we all have our issues and challenges, but I have tools now. And as great and as awesome as the entrepreneurial journey has been, owning my own business, and then 7 years ago, stepping into trucking and starting Mother Trucker Yoga, just really looking for a change and to serve a population that was really looking for some deep nourishment. And that's been amazing. But really that holistically whole and mindfulness and slowing down and being self-aware during that time, I also got pregnant, got married to my high school sweetheart early on in those early 20s recovery. And so I was like learning about myself, having to be a mom. Now I'm a wife, I'm a business owner. Talk about doing everything at once. But something so amazing happened because I was able to figure out me and I was able to learn what I want and I care about. And I had now people relying on me, which actually helped me in that process because now I'm not just responsible for myself. And fast forward now, I have 3 kids, 16, 14, and 9. I have a business that I love, a husband that I absolutely adore now we'll be married 18 years here in September. And I feel like I'm doing things right. And I don't say that arrogantly, but I see now my oldest at 16 the things that I went through and the things that I've learned and are trying to apply to my kids so they don't go through the hardships that I did, I'm seeing it pay off now. And it's pretty cool to watch. And I think that's part of the reason why we're chatting here today.
Wow, what a journey you've condensed into minutes here that is a lifetime. I'm not going to let you jump over some of those things. I just think they're fascinating. I think one, you said that you lost hope. And I think that's interesting. Is your given name Hope, or is that a name that's been changed?
It is my given name. I have three sisters, Heather, Jessica, and Lindsay. I'm smack dab in the middle. And for whatever reason, my parents chose that name. And
Mm.
when I was growing up, I hated it. I'm like the kid at the Catholic school that has the name Hope. How weird is that? And I get it now. I do believe everything happens for a reason. There are no mistakes in life. And I believe that was for myself, but also hope for others as well.
That's just so fascinating that it's a little tiny tidbit of that your name is Hope and you felt like you lost hope. I don't know how far you want to go down the path, but I'm interested to know in that addiction situation early in life, can you give us a little insight of what that was? Because we're here to talk about intentionality.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to dip into what is going on in other places of our lives to help us understand it better. Could you give us a little bit of maybe that perspective of what that was like for you?
Yeah. When I reflect back on my childhood, I think my parents were lovely and great, and they were using the tools that they had. But there were a lot of tools that they didn't have. And for listeners listening here, if you're 35 plus, you probably understand what I'm saying. When, it was just like, be still, be seen, not heard, suck it up. Why are you crying? All these things. And it wasn't really one thing, but I also came from an alcoholic household. I came from an addictive household. We have a family history of that and very codependent parents and kind of caught in the middle of that. And I didn't have the skill sets, and neither did my parents, to teach me how to deal with emotions and how to deal with feelings and how to deal with social stuff. My mom was amazing with telling me and my sisters, be yourself. It doesn't matter what other people think, except she forgot one really critical piece, and that was how to do that. And so growing up as a teenager, having a little bit of a rocky home life, and then feeling the need to be perfect socially to be accepted and be wanted and be in the in crowd landed me with the only way I knew how to cope, which was an eating disorder, which was I can't control anything in my life, but I can control one thing. And the thing I can control is food. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I realized as an addict, I was using food to numb my feelings because they were too big for me to deal with. And so when I would overexercise, restrict, binge and purge, use drugs or alcohol, whatever, it was because those feelings, no one ever gave me the skills on how to deal with them, how to feel them, how to process them. And that's no fault to anybody. But that yoga piece, and this is why I feel like yoga became my weekly ritual of second chances, because that once a week, even though it was for an hour, I don't want to get into religious or beliefs, or that's not what this is about. This is about you getting in touch with you. Yoga gave me 60 minutes once a week for me to just be me, for me to feel and then watch those feelings pass and be like, wow, it actually doesn't. I remember that class where that anxiety is here and then it actually passed. It did go away. And I would work out of those yoga classes week after week, feeling normal. And that was a feeling that I had not felt in years. And so yoga became this lifeline for me to learn how to feel, learn how to deal with hard stuff, breathe, express myself, and also let out some of that anxiety and fear and tension that was caught in my body that so many other people are dealing with. And we call it things like fibromyalgia. We call it things like chronic pain. We call it things like injuries. But how much of that is really emotionally strucken, emotionally induced? If your muscle tissue and your fascia holds 10 times more emotions than even what your brain can sustain, what is that saying about us needing to physically move, physically breathe? And that became really my therapist. And once yoga became such a part of my life, I was like, I'm the only one here doing this. I'm alone again. So being a yoga teacher, opening a yoga studio, I built my own community. I think me owning that studio and teaching all those years was actually probably just as much for me as it was for the students, because I was attracting people that were broken like I was, and they
Hmm.
didn't come in and be like, I'm broken, so are you, yay. But we
Yeah.
connected in a way because we were all looking for the same thing: to be seen, to be heard, to feel, to get raw, and to be able to be vulnerable so that we could find ourselves again. And yoga really became a place for me week after week, day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, to be able to do that for myself and create a safe place for other people to do that as well.
I think it's quite interesting to me that avoidance is some level of the opposite or the antithesis of intention because we spend time, like in your case, what you've shared as far as avoiding, numbing, trying to avoid what actually is going on. And I love that you said that it's the 13th step for you. It became a place where you could be you, that you got better insight and you could let things pass. I think that's really interesting. And it all came from somebody else using language to say, you look like a yoga person. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was. That's why I think there are no mistakes in life, and that really everything is happening in life for us. It's not against us. And if I hadn't listened in that moment, if I hadn't let my leap personality be like, something just drove me to do that, I don't know where I would be now, 40 years old, 20 some years later, what my life would be like. And part of me always felt, especially in my early 20s, I always said I didn't want to have children. I didn't want to have a family, that this was a burden, that this was something I was trying to hide because kids are smart. And I did not want to move forward intentionally carrying this thing. And I just felt like yoga kind of showed me there was this light at the end of the tunnel for me, but I had to do the work. And I think that was a big piece. And in that intentionality piece, whether it's business, relationships, finance, whatever it is, so many people are lacking that intentionality of intention plus effort, because you can want something, but too many people are like, I want that. What's the easiest way? And I'm all for path of least resistance. My husband's in construction. Let's use the backhoe and not a shovel, right?
Yeah.
That's smart. But there is a piece in life that if you want to sustain something and you want to have something for the long term, what do you think helps you keep that? It's when you look back and you see the effort that you put forth to earn that, the intentionality of being like, this is what I want. And for me, I felt there was a piece of me that was like, Hope, you're never going to live like this forever. You can live a normal life. There was this tiny voice,
Mm.
even when I couldn't see it. The intention was always, I'm going to figure this out. This is going to happen for me, but I have to keep moving forward. And I think that intentional directness of a goal is something a lot of people struggle with because we feel like we want everything. We feel like we need to do everything all at once. And doing everything all at once dilutes your efforts towards reaching anything worth having.
So you went through a process that where you felt that you were avoiding and you had to get, I'm trying to use your words of the get through it and figure out what you wanted to do, but you also had this feeling of I'm going to get through. I'm going to figure it out. And then you mentioned one thing a little bit earlier that having the added responsibility of family and children was useful. Tell me a little more about how was that so useful in the context of this?
You know, I look at life, I think we need to focus on ourselves and we need to figure out what we want in life. But as humans, we're social beings, we're pack animals. We're not meant to be alone in the mountains for 40 years. That's not how we're designed. And that feeling of responsibility for somebody else actually was a healthy pressure. It's just like stress. There's healthy stress. If you want to build muscle, you have to stress your muscle, right? In order
Yeah.
to grow it. That pressure of, I want to be the best wife possible for my husband. I want to be the best, healthiest mother possible for my children was a healthy pressure for me to SHIT or get off the pot. Like, Hope, if you really want this, you're going to have to work for it. And I wanted a family. I wanted to marry my high school sweetheart. But there was a part of me that growing up in a household that was dysfunctional, I knew I didn't want that type of a marriage. I knew that that didn't have to be my story, but I had to work for it and I had to figure me out. And kind of cool in the process, like my husband has figured out so much about himself because when you're growing, the people around you have to choose, do I come with or do I stay behind? And so
Mhm.
my husband and I have such a great relationship, and we really love and admire each other, that it's like I'm growing and I'm pulling him forward. Then he's growing and he's pulling me forward. And now I'm growing and I'm pulling my kids forward. And they're growing and they're forcing me and pulling me forward. That is the beauty of intentional social settings, and surround yourself with people that you're choosing. Now, I can't choose my kids. I could choose my husband. I did, but I'm choosing to be a certain person that is authentic to me because I know it directly reflects onto them.
I think there's a little bit of me that says you did choose your children, but you didn't choose maybe their personalities to some extent, but you did choose them. You wanted them, and so they came as they are, and we learned from that. But what a beautiful way to put it, that as we get more aware of what's happening around us and there's pressure put upon us that you said useful or you said positive, right?
Mhm.
That then allows us to grow. It's the pressure that allows us to grow. It's the working the muscles that allows us to grow in those experiences. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. So, tell us a little more about that growth as you became a mom and now you got little ones all around, or tell us a little more about that.
Well, funny, like a week or two ago, I was talking with a girlfriend and we were joking because we have kids now in high school together. And it's like, when you leave the hospital as a new parent, first time, how crazy is that? That they just say goodbye and give you a child, and there's no manual, no book, no nothing. What is wrong with us? Seriously, you come home and it's like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to care for this kid, but how? But I think the flip side of that, the cool side of that is you get to decide. You get to write the rules for your family. You get to decide how you want to live, the morals you want. A friend of mine calls it your family's coat of arms. What does your family stand for? Being intentional about raising your children, being intentional with your marriage, being intentional with your business. And when my kids were young, especially my older two, because there's about a 4-year gap between my daughter, who's in the middle, and my youngest son, I really thought, and again, I was the one leading with this because my husband, it wasn't that he didn't want it, but I had these ideas and I had this passion. I thought to myself, how do I want to raise my kids? What is important to me? I sat down with my husband and I was like, what's important to you? How do you see wanting to have our kids come into the world? Because there's a lot of people that talk about, oh, I don't like social media. It's so bad for my kids. And they have every app under the sun and they sleep with their phone in their bed. Like, that's not being intentional with what you say is important. Or I care about my health. I only go to McDonald's 5 days a week. That's not being intentional about the things you say you care about. So my husband and I sat down and we made a list of 20 things that were really important to us. God was one of them. Having a healthy marriage that our children can see and model after. We want them to see us affectionate in front of them. We want them to see that we work out our problems. We want them to see that we work together. And also separately, we wanted to emulate what a healthy marriage. I also wanted my kids to know how to handle emotions, what emotions were, how to feel them, and how to not be the person to take those emotions away, which is so painful as a parent, to have to sit there and watch your kid be upset, be angry, be sad, be disappointed, be left out, but to be able to guide them with that all the way to, I wanted my kids to learn cursive. I didn't want them to be going through core curriculum, which was many years ago. So we intentionally chose schools, chose social circles, chose different things because that was the coat of arms we chose for our family. And imagine if more people would even just do that for themselves. Like, I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be strong. I didn't want to be skinny looking. I had been that my whole life and I looked frail. I wanted to be strong. What does that look like? That means I have to lift weights. That means I do some yoga, but I also walk every day. What does that look like? I have to be intentional with that. And so I know that's the long answer, but raising kids, and this is just my personal experience for those of you listening, when you don't think about it, it's not intentional. You are just waking up and doing whatever society and the people around you are saying you should or should not do, whatever the school is saying you should or should not do. Like when I go to the doctor works for me. I don't work for the doctor. So if I have something I want to do, I don't care what they say. I have the right to say no. I'm going to listen to them as the expert, but I get to decide. And so raising my kids and drawing lines in the sand and shaping them and moving them forward, our hardest intentional direction by far, I have a 14 and a 16-year-old, has been technology. And we have, up until a few years ago, my kids, we have no technology in our house. They have a computer for school, but they didn't have cell phones growing up. They didn't have a tablet. We didn't have video games. We had TV, but that was it, because I knew that I would rather have them frustrated with me and frustrated with some other issues in life than to be attached to this thing and have to go through and struggle with the things I struggled with in life, which were addiction
Mm.
that nearly killed me, and
Mm.
social issues and anxiety that I felt like I didn't know how to handle. And
Yeah.
so my oldest is 16 now, and he just got a phone a year ago. My daughter now has had one. It's like a home phone slash cell phone. And now she gets one because she's in high school, but they don't have
Mhm.
social media, zero. And it is a struggle, and it does suck. And it is a challenge for friends, but it's teaching them so much about life and true friends and how to use their minds, and they're socially apt and they know how to do things with their downtime, like so many other positives. The cool thing is now they're seeing it. So that intentionality we talked about, and then how that trickle effect, they're seeing it now with their peers. Like whenever I talk to Sarah, she's always on her phone, or everyone is always wanting to just like Snapchat. No one wants to call me anymore. They're seeing the repercussions with their friends, or, Hudson, when he's at school, he's so rude to the teachers. He just pulls out his phone and doesn't even care. And it's like all of the things that mattered to me and my husband, by doing that one thing that sucked, and it still sucks, they are now seeing it. They are now seeing it and are now making the choice on their own intentionally, because they see the payoff. That's the beauty of blind faith and of having a goal. And even though it feels tough in the middle where a lot of people quit, if you stay intentional, you stay focused, and you stay committed to it, you will get to reap the fruits of your labor. And I see it with health, with them, with technology, with school, with friends, with everything. I don't have it all figured out, but man, staying committed and clear to your goals, or even just setting them, everybody benefits. Everyone does.
Yeah. I've heard this phrase used recently. You've chosen a difficult thing. You said it's hard to do that, the social media and the cell phone situation, the technology in your family, but you have a sense, better than most, of what addiction feels like. And I recognize that social media addiction is actually a thing that we don't really care as much about, but it's a real thing. It's a real
Yeah.
deal. And so that's a different hard than the hard that you're having them go through. So we pick and choose. Now, going back to how you and your husband got together and said, how do we want to do this? How much of that was a consequence of you having or deciding to have children versus how you and your husband would have been independent of that?
My husband and I are high school sweethearts. And so we got together when we were 16 and stayed together ever since. And I always think he saw me before I even saw myself. He saw the real me before I knew who the real me was. Who enters into a relationship knowingly when somebody is really struggling with addiction, like
Yeah.
near death? Who does that? Who wants that? And he did. He saw me. He always told me, I see the real you. I know who you really are. And just loved me even when I didn't love myself. And so getting into recovery with somebody in my corner, and make no mistake, we had communication challenges, and we had to learn how to navigate emotions. I was explosive and he was silent. He had to learn how to do that thing again. Therapy was very helpful with that, with yoga. But my husband and I, when we got married, I got pregnant a lot quicker. I didn't think I could have kids. I had so much damage to my body for 10 plus years with an eating disorder that I didn't even think I could have kids. And when we got pregnant, kind of unexpectedly, it was a little shock. We were thinking maybe a little bit later, get our lives together, but God had other
Yeah. Yeah.
plans. And we unexpectedly lost our daughter shortly after
Mm.
birth, dying of complications that we were just not aware of. I believe to my core that she gave up her life so I could have one, because I
Oh,
was
wow.
still struggling. I was in and out of recovery. I was good, and then I was not, and then I was good, and I was not. And I knew it. I was like, this goes back to the thing I said earlier. I didn't want to have kids and have these problems. because
Yeah.
these problems would become their problems. And I believe she gave up her life so I could have one. Her passing was such a driver for me to get my life together.
Mm.
And it pushed me to figure myself out, to get healthy, to get the help that I really needed, to start to really be serious about the kind of life that I wanted. And I'm so grateful. I am so grateful for her life the way that it was. And I know that people that have experienced loss of children, sometimes they never get to that place. But I feel very grateful that she gave me that mirror to be able to say, hey, you can still do this, Hope. You can still live. And my oldest son then a year later came, and there was still a lot of learning. I still had a lot of stuff going on, but we were learning together and we were able to continue to move forward together. And I believe that everyone in your life comes into your life for a specific purpose and reason and at the right time, and there's no mistakes. I'm just intentionally moving forward. So for my husband and I, when we got together and started thinking about life, I think I was probably driving this more than him because I had struggled so severely emotionally, mentally, physically, socially, and had this slow awakening of all the things that shouldn't be, that he wanted it too. He wanted it for me. And I think he also probably needed it. I look at where we were previously and where we are now. Oh my gosh, we're like different people, completely different people. And it's cool. It's cool to see. That's growth. That's intentional living. That's commitment in a relationship, in life, in job, and everything. I always think my backbone is loyalty. I'm loyal to the cause, loyal to the people. If I say I'm going to be your friend and I like you, I am loyal to you until you show me otherwise. And I think that's a big driver for me to want to be healthy and happy. And even in my business, this time around, I have a really successful business because I understand intentionality. I'm in a better place mentally. I'm committed to the cause. And I also know my worth. And I think, how cool is it for my kids to see me knowing my worth and asking for that and rising to the level that I feel like I can rise to. And I see them modeling that in their own lives. And my husband, my kids, my surrounding people, it's just, I don't know. When I see people living at a level lower than what I can see their potential, I just want to shake them because there's
Mm.
so much more life has available to you, despite the economy, despite inflation, despite religion, despite any of that. There is still so much good out there and so much available to you, but you have to go and get it.
When I reflect back on what you've just said, I think a little bit of the question that I asked and the answer is that your first child, what was her name?
Faith.
Faith. Oh, hope and faith. What a beautiful combination there. But your daughter, Faith, gave you a second life or gave you the wind that you needed, gave you the kicker that you needed. And while not everybody has gone through that kind of pain, and I don't believe that not everybody can understand, I don't understand the way that you had to deal with that. But those little things in life, if we allow them to alter our path, if we allow them to provide us more clarity in what's going on, man, that can be such a catalyst for such amazing growth. And it sounds like that was the Kickstarter. And that in no way depreciates the incredible being of your daughter, Faith, that she was that catalyst for you. What an amazing path she put you on.
Well, which goes back to if you remind yourself when life gets hard, life is happening for me. Life is not against me. Everything in my path is for my greater good. It changes your perspective. When something happens in my business or I keep failing at something or keep on getting roadblocks, I tell myself, this must be because the thing I need to figure out, I haven't in order for me to up level. And
Hmm.
once I figure this out, I get to up level. Because if I don't and I up level, now that thing I didn't figure out is going to be bigger and it's going to cost me more. And I think the same thing with my kids. When I'm butting heads with them, it's like I need to look at this differently. I need to come at this a different angle. What am I missing? Because otherwise, we're going to continue on that journey and we're going to continue to do this, but it's going to be bigger and bigger. Why? Because they're going to get older and have more and more of a strong will and a voice and freedom and adulthood. And it's going to create a bigger and bigger wedge. And so this everything is figure outable type approach of intentional, like I'm going to speak with intention to them. I used to be explosive. Now I've learned the art of silence, and it's okay to pause and revisit things the next day when we're both cooled off. These types of approaches to life really keep you in the driver's seat. It really helps you realize that life is not bad. It's really preparing you for the next thing, and all things pass. Just like time, all feelings, all emotions, all moments, all roadblocks, they all pass. Nothing is permanent in this life. And it's kind of a freeing feeling when you stop and think about that for a second. Like, this moment right now, our conversation, it's going to pass. And that's okay. If someone rubs you the wrong way, it's going to pass. Let it go. It's okay. And that's such a liberating feeling. I pull that from the same mentality I had trying to get into recovery, because I would over restrict or I would binge and purge. And I would look at myself in the mirror after those actions. And a therapist said something to me that kind of tweaked my brain a little bit. I would look at myself in the eyes and say, Hope, this is in your past now. What can you learn from this? And I
Hmm.
would look at myself in the eyes and ask myself, why do I think this happened? Why did I do this? Why did I use this mechanism to deal with whatever I was dealing with? And I would have this conversation with myself. Then I had to promise myself that when I left that room, I had to leave that behind. I can't keep punishing myself for the rest of the day or the rest of the week or the rest of the month, which I would often do, and many of us do. It's time for me to move forward. And if I mess up in the next 30 minutes, then I do. And then I'm going to keep doing that. But the time span got bigger and bigger for me to where I was on the right path. And I think
Hmm.
for a lot of us, we have to give ourselves permission to let go of the things we did wrong, the things other people did wrong, and intentionally choose to be in the present and look to the future, because that's where the change is going to happen. That's where all the good is going to happen. Even reminiscing about great memories, you're limiting yourself. Because if you're trying to recreate those, you are putting a cap on what the potential is that you can experience in your life. And that is so sad, because there is so much more infinite joy out there for you, but you have to decide that you're worth it and you're of value and you deserve it, and make the intentional direction to say, that is where I'm going and that is what I deserve.
You identified as that is who you were. That was in the past and now different in the future. Why does identity shift things so much? Because I think it's really easy for people to identify as this type of person, or a person that gets angry, or a person that you said is explosive. If that's how you identify, why is identifying differently such a big tool?
For me personally, I didn't know who I was for many years. And I think many people don't. We're not taught that. We're not like, who do you stand for, Hope? What's important to you? What do you like? What do you not like? We're more so always telling other people how they should be, like a parent to a child, rather
No.
than allowing them to become whoever it is they are. So for me, that yoga practice of coming to the mat and breathing and feeling and teaching yoga was the first place I told other people besides my husband and my immediate family that knew that I was struggling with depression and that I had anxiety and addiction issues. And I slowly broke free from this mold, this identity that other people were putting on me. And I started to share the real person I was, and something beautiful happened. It was okay. People didn't judge me. People didn't be like, oh, I like the old version of Hope better. If anything, they started to become more of who they were. They started to share. They started to authentically be. They started to be okay with their bodies. And so there was this like beautiful unfolding for me that happened the more and more I figured out who I was. And that was a struggle all the way down to teaching yoga. I would see other people and they were teaching power yoga. And I'm like, I must suck because I'm not teaching that. So I better teach power yoga. And then I taught power yoga and it felt inauthentic. I could feel the class
Right.
wasn't as sync as I wanted to be. I really intuitively taught. And then it was like, oh, other people are teaching Pilates. Like I should teach Pilates. And so I got all the certifications and did all that. And then I felt like this is hurting people. And then I kind of started to figure out me and gave myself permission to be like, I can take some of this and I can take some of this and I can mold these together and I can lead the way with me. I can lead the way with what I feel is right and truth and in the path that I need to do. And teaching was such a powerful experience to figure out my own identity because it was kind of like a take it or leave it. This is me. This is my teaching style. This is the kind of class I ran. And every time someone would challenge that, I had to learn to stand in my person instead of being like, okay, I'll be that tomorrow. I was like, oh, I respect that. However, this is the style I teach, or these are the
Yeah.
types of classes I teach. And I think that confrontation for a lot of people, especially as a parent, there was a piece of a generation that was like, any confrontation, anything like, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. Let me help you. Let me make it better. And confrontation, conflict, we talked about stress, like stressing a muscle, that creates growth. That creates a sense of identity. And that really became a part of my marriage. It became a part of how I raise my kids. It's now become a part of my kids. It's a big part of my business. One of the reasons why I am where I am in my business is because I have such a strong sense of identity in myself, in my brand, in my niche, in my audience. The old me with my yoga studio was like, I help people from 2 days old to 102, athletes, anybody with the MS, wheelchair. I help everybody because I was afraid to miss something. And now
Yeah.
in my business and trucking, I'm like, I help truckers. Those are the people I work with. And something cool has happened with that. The more narrow, the more you speak to one person, the more everybody listens and self-identifies. And so even in my own personal life, the more convicted I am about my beliefs, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about it or tell people they're wrong, but rather this is how I live. Man, do people then start to self-reflect? And you really see the interpersonal skills come out of people's abilities to be like, why do I feel this way? Or is she saying something that is rubbing me the wrong way? Why? Or something I agree with? Why? And so I have nothing but great things, Bryan, to say about the journey to self-discovery, the intentionality of understanding your own personal identity is such a critical piece of finding joy in life.
I want to highlight that journey. I want to speak directly to a listener that may feel like they're not their favorite version themselves. Because I think you and I have talked and we've spanned decades in this conversation of a matter of minutes. And I think that it needs to happen considering what we're doing here. But at the same token, it's been a process. Some part of me wishes that we could interview the 24-year-old version of you for 30 seconds and then hear the difference. Because I think that some people might be listening to like, oh, well, Hope is just dynamic. She's just vibrant. She lives her life. And I didn't know the 24-year-old version of yourself. But at the same token, I can see there's a process, that journey. And sometimes we want a quick change and it takes time. And I still think coming back to the premise of identity, that you must identify as a person who is like this, as a person who used to do that, as a person who used to have that problem. Because that's what can shift that mental game that we play quicker so we can have faster gains, recognizing it's still going to be a journey. It's not going to be like, oh, Hope had these problems at age 18 and now at age 40, she has none of them. We think of that as a quick overnight success, and it was decades in the making. And it's just an honor to be around a person like you that is living into that. Now, maybe answer this one question for me. Why do we as human beings cloak? You said it's so important to understand your true identity as a person, and that will change everything. But why do we cloak that? Why do we hide it and not allow our true self to come through?
I think it's different for a lot of people, but some of the things I have experienced and I've seen is one, there is such a societal pressure that success looks a certain way, health looks a certain way, aging looks a certain way. And this kind of ties into my kids and trying the social media thing is trying to keep exposure for as long as possible away, minimizing that of these unrealistic standards and expectations that are completely false, that are completely fake, and them thinking, especially my daughter, that is real. That is who you're supposed to be versus an internal feeling of who you want to be and who you are. And growing up for me, again, my parents only could parent with the skills they have, and we always hope to be better than our parents. My mom always said, I want you to be better than me. I want my kids to be better than me. And knowing that was never really a conversation. Like they asked us, oh, what college do you want to go to? What do you want to be when you grow up? But it wasn't like, who are you as a person? What's important to you? What do you value? And I see that in my kids, and I'm trying to gently nudge them in directions that feel self-fulfilling, that they feel is going to be things for them that they can carry with into their adulthood. Like my daughter loves horses. She's more of an introvert. She loves reading. So trying to help her find things that express. She loves cooking, baking, and language. And my son's the opposite. He's more of an extrovert. My two boys are very extroverted. And so trying to help them figure out what they like, but also that the version of them compared to their siblings, both of those versions are okay for each other. They don't have to be each other to get their needs met. You said something, and as you said it, I wrote it down. You said time. And so time is a big piece of this. Nobody can figure out anything in life, I think, in just a snap of their fingers. It looks like that when you see a reel in 90 seconds. Wow, look at that transformation. But time really is a gift. And I still see things of addiction creep up in my mind. I still see habits and behaviors and responses in me where I'm like, oh, no hope. You know what that creates. There are things in me that I have navigated towards. I know I need to exercise every day because it helps me process anxiety and stress. And if I go too many days without it, I start to feel anxiety. I feel that pressure. And so I have the tools because time has shown me what tools I like. And the last piece is looking at those tools, the things that you enjoy. The only way to figure that out is for you to engage in them and try on life in many different formats as possible. Once I let go of the identity that I had to be a vegan yoga teacher that namaste'd all the time and had to look a certain way, and I was able to step away from that because that was the identity I had, one, put on myself and two, other people put on me. I was like, no, I actually really like lifting weights. I actually feel better as a pescatarian, not as a vegan. My body was disintegrating. After 20 some years, I was like, this isn't healthy for me. And finding my own identity within all of these options has been so empowering because now I don't have the limitations of other people telling me I'm doing life right or wrong. It's kind of like a diet. You have to follow this keto diet this way or you're not on keto. And it's like, well, what if that doesn't work for you? What if that is creating more misery than it's worth? I want to be able to have a darn piece of cake and not feel like I have to go throw it up or run 10 miles. I want to have it because I enjoy it and know that I can just eat a piece and be okay. Why? Because I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay with my identity. I'm okay with people looking at me when I put a fork in my mouth. That took a long time to get there. But I think for a lot of people, especially if you have children, the more you are okay with yourself and the more you continue every day, I go to bed at night and I reflect on my day and how I behaved and how I acted and reacted, and I try to be better the next day intentionally. That is going to trickle effect to my children and then their children and the people they're around and my students and everybody. That art of identity plus intentionality and commitment really brings the joy, even in turmoil, that so many of us are looking for. And it is available to us all, Bryan. I really believe that. I don't care what hardship you were born into. It really is available to us all.
And we have to have enough awareness that we can go after it. I think that is a key. But what you said makes me think of, I live in this society. I've got the friends, I got the family I have, right? And growing up where these are the sports, these are the things that we pay attention to. And later in life, in the last just few years, I just love soccer. I love it. I love soccer. And it's actually football in every other country in the world, but soccer, right? And that's not something in my sphere that a lot of people even care about. There's just not a lot of us. There are more, but in my group of people. And so, yeah, that's a trivial thing, I recognize, but it's a system of, if you identify something that really makes your heart beat, gets you moving, and it's something that's useful for you, that can really change things because it just brings more joy and purpose to the things you're doing instead of doing things because everybody else is doing them.
A great activity that I did with myself and I do with my kids regularly is I just sat down one day many years ago and said, what do you like, Hope? And I made a list. And you cannot question. So if there's a part of your brain that's like trying to logic out, you shouldn't put that on there, or that's the old you, or your parents would never allow it, or it's too expensive, whether it's things you like right now, or you used to like that you want to do again, or things you haven't done and you like to do, write it down. And so I made this list of things that bring me joy, things that I want to identify with, things that I love engaging with, things that I would love to aspire to. And I started writing them down. And then I did it also for how do I want to present myself? Because I do a lot of speaking, I do a lot of teaching. And in the world I'm in now, most women, they're like dressed to the hilt. They're in their like suits and they're like dresses. And that's just not me. I mean, I'm a small town girl. I have Vans on and nice dress pants and a blazer or jeans and cowboy boots. That's my thing. And it took me a long time to be okay with that identity. But I'll tell you what, if I would wear the other clothes, people would be able to see right through it. That's not me, because I shine best when I show up as me. And so however that is for you, whatever activities you love, whatever the clothes you like to wear, however it is you like to style your hair, I'm giving you permission, if you're listening, to just own it. And if you're showing up to not harm, but to help, like if I'm doing something to spite someone, because sometimes that part of me is, oh, I'm mad at that person, I'm going to do this to get under their skin because I'm human, right? I have to stop myself and be like, are you helping or hurting Hope? And recognizing that, because I grew up in a household where there was a lot of hurting going on intentionally and they didn't know it. And recognizing that has really helped me, again, intentionally shift my direction, intentionally show up as me. And that's okay if one day I want to be a biker leather jacket person and the next day maybe I want to wear a dress. I don't care what other people think, because that's how I'm identifying. That's how I show up. That's who I am. I'm a little bit of everything all rolled up into one. That's just me. And so for those of you listening, make the list. Show up as you. Take the dance class. Go get your motorcycle's license. Take up running, even if you feel like you don't look like a runner. Take a language class. Call up your kid you haven't talked to in months and just be like, you want to go to lunch and hang out. Do the thing, because ain't no one going to offer you the thing the older that you get. Show up and be yourself. Be intentional with clear direction and purpose, because the flip side is you will also start receiving all of those things that you've been saying you want to experience, you want to receive, and you're rewarded. I think there is a law of attraction there, but you got to do the work. That's the piece there that's missing often.
Own it, own you, I think are phenomenal. I think the piece of intentionality that I always like to couple with that is be you, absolutely, and have intention about who you want to be. Because the default, the way that society tells us, the things that we already are doing that are just like innate and not necessarily great. Some of them are. There's some innate things that I'm glad that I breathe without thinking. It's really useful. I don't have to think about that. If you have intention about who you want to be, you don't need to be somebody else. Be you, and then be the most amazing version of you that you can be, right?
And surround yourself with people that are wanting that same thing for themselves or are supporting you in that. That's a big piece of really looking at your surroundings, your environment. People often say, yeah, Hope, but I can't change that. Well, actually, a lot of stuff you can. There's just sometimes consequences to that. Like if you don't love the people at your job and they're like sucking the life out of you, get a new job. Well, I can't. Well, actually, you can. The effort to get the job is a lot, and it's probably making you anxious and you don't really know what to do because you haven't gotten a new job in a while, but it's figure outable, and it can help you figure out you and be the better version of you. And that's okay. My husband's going through that right now. He's like, oh, Hope, but what if people will like, I'm switching jobs again. And I'm like, who cares? If you're not happy and you're not being valued and it's slowly diminishing your inner self and it's spilling over to other areas, who cares? Go be you. Go do the thing you need to do. And that goes back to this like artificial limitations and parameters on how you're supposed to be. When your kid is old enough to walk, he should be in a sport. And my husband and I had a thing where the first team you're on is Team Krebs. That's my married name. And so until you know how to be a team player on our family's team, going out and being on another team seems a little contraindicative. It doesn't make sense. This is the team I want you to learn how to play on first. I want you to figure out you. So when you go and join another team, you are strong with
Right.
you. It's not like I need to be like Billy and wear shoes like Billy and do everything Billy does because I have no sense of who I am. And we held our kids back from doing team sports, which are a big thing in our area. And we got a lot of flack from people. It was like,
Hmm.
oh, and then they took it personal. I was like, you do whatever you need to do for your family. This was something we intentionally chose because we want our kids to figure out who they are. We want them to be okay with not having an activity every night of the week. We want them to understand what downtime is. We want them to understand what trying to go and do activities that are self invoking. Part of that was also, I'm thinking ahead. When you're an adult, I want my kids to be able to engage in things that they have in their back pocket with and without people. So if all they do is play football and all they do is play volleyball, well, that's hard to do by yourself. But
Yep.
my kids were rollerblading at 4 years old, riding a bike at 2.5. They love hiking, snowboarding, skiing. They're doing all of these things with and without people now. Now they're on teams and they're in activities, but they're so strong in who they are. There's this natural leadership happening, but also they're totally cool with taking the back seat and still being them. And I feel so good about that because I was so convicted about that piece. That was such a part of my identity and an identity I wanted for them. The intention was there, but it was the follow through and commitment, even when I felt pressure from other people, that I think that's why we're reaping that benefit right now.
Wow. I think we need to all hear like the special class that is taken in your home for the children that you have. It sounds almost utopian the way that you're describing it. And I'm sure that it has its, you said it's hard, there's pains, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it sounds like the culture you're creating in your family is one of extreme intelligence, like actual emotional and physical and mental intelligence, as opposed to the default way to do things just the easy way.
Yeah. And I think it's there for a lot of other people, but it is easier. I mean, I recognize my siblings do not parent this way. And I love my nieces and nephews. My sister in law does not parent this way. I'm much more of a hands off parent in the way of something in me always said. And I think this goes back to maybe some of the trauma and the things that I've been through in life and the identity I've created for myself of it's not my job to tell my kids how to be or to push them in a direction. I'm really here just to walk alongside of them and try to keep them safe, keep them healthy, but they got to make mistakes. They have to mess up. They have to figure out them, even if it's completely not the path I want. I'm going to show them the options. But ultimately, the older they get, I'm letting go more and more. And for some of my immediate family that have children, that's really uncomfortable for them because it looks like I'm a free range parent, take that however you want. But my kids are so well adjusted. They're polite, they engage, they follow through, they have jobs. There's such a different mentality going on. They're self sufficient. We had a rule in our house once you're in first grade, you make your own lunch. I have a list of healthy foods and the categories they need to have to get them started when my kids were little. My youngest is in fifth grade. Why do I need to make lunch for you? These are life skills. At 10, you do your own laundry. If it comes down the
Mm.
chute, I'll do it if I have to, but you do your own laundry. Why? Because these are skills to create self sufficiency and to help build up your self belief and your internal worth and your self confidence that you can do these things. My daughter goes grocery shopping for us because she loves cooking at home and knows the foods we want. And like all of these things that my kids are doing that parents love doing for their kids. But I'm thinking way ahead. What can I do for my children to help them feel when they become an adult, they are ready for this world? They're not gypped or jaded or paralyzed because it's cool that you can kick a ball or shoot a basketball at half court, but you don't know how to cook for yourself, clean for yourself, balance a checkbook, or God forbid, be able to sign up for something on your own. Those are the things that have been important as our family because I believe that those are things that create confidence in a human being and us as a person, and all the other stuff is bonus.
All you've said comes back to one of the initial comments you made. It was like, I have this child and they just send us home with this child and we got to figure it out. And the beautiful thing is, it sounds like the way you've expressed it, you've figured it out. I'm not saying you have everything figured it out and everything's perfect. And yet you have a system, you figure out a way that works to create a future for your kid that is beautiful, that is at least gives them opportunities, gives them options as opposed to limits their options. Whereas I think we all come from things that weren't perfect. No family's perfect. And so there's challenges in this and challenges that. There's finances, relationships. You can find a way in every family. There's something wrong. And you've directed that into well, I'm not perfect everywhere, but I'm going to definitely focus on these areas. And that is the definition of attention. I'd love to meet one of your kids. Maybe we could have one of your kids on this.
That would be awesome. Oh gosh. I should start rephrasing that. When we have kids, we get to figure it out.
Yeah.
We get to. And we get to figure out our way. I joke with my older two, and this has been a very open conversation of, I know when you get older, you're going to look back at your childhood and our parenting, and there are going to be things that you felt like we did really wrong and you're upset about. And I'm okay with that. And I just want to let you know that's normal. But I hope that there are also going to be things that we did that were right, and those will outweigh the wrong things. And so I'm trying to keep this dialogue open of always, I tell my kids, remember, I'm on your team. My husband says that too. We are a team, that when they're frustrated or they're angry at us, or we said something that maybe we didn't say it the right way, we always come back to, we're on your team. You can tell me anything. I may be upset with your action, but I will never be upset with you as a person. I will always be there for you. We will figure this out together. There'll be consequences, and sometimes they'll suck, but I will always be on your team. Why? Because I want them to know that we are a team at our core. They are never alone. Their identity is connected to us until it's not, until they go off on their own. And then there's this like break, right? And then they go and make their own family, and we're on the outside. But my hope is that I've created enough on the inside for them to be able to go out and be that person and not falter and not waver. And I think for a lot of people, that intentionality of not just being, I'm a parent, okay, now what? Or parenting's hard, or I can't just take away their phone. Actually, you can just take away their phone. You can delete the apps. You just don't want to, because you don't want to suffer the consequences of that. Well, my kids just don't want to eat that. Well, here's a thought. Don't buy it. I won't buy soda. If my husband wants soda, he has to buy it. I won't buy it because I refuse to feed that to my kids. There are certain things, like we go to the grocery store and my daughter knows now, we look on the back, if it says bioengineered ingredients, it's like a game now. I won't buy it. So it's like, we don't buy cereal anymore because it's in everything. And so now she's just like, I'm instilling in her, you eat real food. You need to put healthy food in, then you can put in other stuff. Water first, then decide if you're hungry. All of these things that have been important to me are now helping shape them and navigate for them. And they're becoming self-reliant. Why? Because I've given them a base for them to create their own identity. I don't need a mini Hope out in the world. I don't need another mini Bryan out in the world. That's my husband. I want a Harper, a Meredith, and an Ivan in the world. And I want them to take the best of me, the best of my husband, and then figure out themselves and figure out who they are, because why do we need them to repeat our own lives? And I think there's a lot of parents out there that are trying to live vicariously through their kids. And I'm not dogging that. I'm not saying, oh, that's wrong or right, but rather you're limiting your kid on the potential in which that they can excel to. That the hope is that they will be better than you. They will know more than you. They will go farther than you, and they will not repeat the mistakes of you. And who am I to limit them from that? Who am I to hold them back from who they are really supposed to become? And I'm not. And I think as a parent, even my oldest, he is me to a core. He's like the best of me and my husband in some of the worst ways, where he's just so impacted or empowered of who he is. He just fights anything anyone says that's going to be this way. He challenges it. And that's kind of my personality. And I have to remind myself that's a good quality.
Yeah.
It's frustrating for me, and I hate it as a parent because it makes me have to work for it. But out in the real world, what does that mean for him? He's never going to be taken. He's never going to let someone push him around. He's never just going to go do something because someone else tells him to do. It might suck right now as an identity, but man, that's exactly what we hope to be as adults. And this goes back to our conversation, Bryan, earlier about self-reflection understanding who you are and intentionality in the actions you're creating. Maybe I'm overly intentional with everything, but I've tried the opposite on for size for a big part of my life and it wasn't working so hot for me. So I
Yeah.
think that's really where addiction and recovery has driven me, is the complete opposite.
Well, I come from the belief that I don't think you can be too much on the spectrum of wanting to focus in, be intentional, have a plan. And I'm not saying that all elements of being a planner are intentional, but if you are intentional in everything in your life, if every minute of your life you're intentional, I am sure you're going to be a happier person,
Even
right?
if you just start with the 1% rule, if every day I try to be 1% better, at the end of the year, I'm 365% better. So if you
Yeah.
feel like, Hope, this is like making me have anxiety thinking about all the things that I would want to change or improve on, well, don't do that. Just start small. When I started wanting to
Mm.
go to the gym more and lift weights after I closed my yoga studio, I thought I'm going to start with 1 day a week because that's what I can commit to. It's not
Yeah.
overwhelming for me. I know I can show up. And I started doing that. And I did that for several months. Then it became 2 days. Then it became 3 days. Then I met some people there. And then we were all like, oh, well, I would really prefer working out in the morning. And we're like, how about we all meet at 6 a.m. in the morning? I'm like, I'll put something together. And so now we've been meeting for months together, 3 mornings a week, working out because the intention is there. I'm surrounding myself with people that want the same thing. They're holding me accountable to showing up for myself because that's something good for me. And the people in my life benefit because the days I do that, I'm on. I'm a good mom. I'm present. I'm more focused at work. And if I get in my way and in my head and I don't show up, the rest of my day kind of trickles down. And so that 1% has become 365% a day. And it's that starting small and committing to you personally and your health or your family or your relationship or your finances. Like, I'm going to save $25 a month for the next 5 months, and then I'm going to increase it to 50 or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Just be intentional with purpose and cut yourself some slack and give yourself some grace that nobody is watching you with a microscope except for yourself on the changes that you're making. But if you show up and you're consistent and you say to yourself, this is because I want to be better for me, everyone around you will benefit.
Well said, Hope. So well said. And I think you've put so much intentionality into our conversation here today that there's so many different tangents we could take off on
I feel
because
the same way. I'm like, ah!
yeah, no, I love that because there's so much to it. But what you've done is made a clear, easy way to think about it. Focus on an area, focus on a thing, and then get better at that. And you'll see the gains. You'll see that the stress you put on yourself in those areas will produce a better result. So I love it. What
100%.
else would you have us know in closing? What else should we know, Hope?
I'll leave you all with this. When I look back at my life, I'm 40 now. I proudly say that, like, age is just a number. I look back at my life and I think, what a blessing. And so if you're listening and still feeling like your life is in turmoil, I just want you to know that to never lose hope that as you move forward every single day, even if you feel like you're still face down, elbow crawling in the mud, there will be a day that you're able to get your chest up out of that mud. There'll be a day that you get up on all fours. There'll be a day that you start walking. There'll be a day that you start running. There'll be a day that you are no longer covered in mud. And that day can't come, though, if you don't recognize and look back and see how far you've come. Even when I was struggling getting into recovery, I looked back and I was like, look at how far I've come. I have a long way to go, but the old me, the me that didn't think I had a problem, the me that was completely in denial, the me that was like slowly dying, that person is gone. That shell of a person does not exist anymore. And as much as I have grown to be the person I am today, I'm actually the person I have always been. I'm actually the person that I was born as. I'm the person that I was always meant to be. It was just covered with all of this other stuff. And so show grace to yourself. Show grace to yourself that you don't have to go out and search for yourself externally. You actually are who you are supposed to be. But it's just peeling away the layers, getting out of the dirt day after day, brushing yourself off and looking in the mirror and saying to yourself, I'm enough. I am enough. I have something to contribute to this world. Earlier in our conversation, I shared with you about my daughter and how I felt like her life, her passing gave me life. Her short life was actually a gift for me to keep living. And when she passed for 2 years, every single day I said to myself, God, there has to be a purpose in this. Please show me the reason why she is not here and I still am. Please show me. And something amazing started happening. I started seeing all of these reasons connecting her to my life at that point, in my life even today. I started seeing signs. I started seeing people saying certain things that connected to my life or sharing about their story of their child passing. One day I had a concussion many years ago and I was laying on the couch and I was listening to the TV because I couldn't watch the flashing. And on came this infomercial about jewelry. And they were talking about this faith piece, this piece of faith jewelry. And it was a butterfly. And the lady came on and was like, the meaning of a butterfly is faith, because faith lives on forever. And then here's the crazy thing that started happening. I started seeing butterflies everywhere. And I started saying, that's faith. My kids to this day, we see a butterfly and it's faith. And so never lose faith. Faith is around you all the time, but you have to decide to see what the good is in whatever it is you're going through. And with intention, continue to try to stand up no matter how thick the mud is, no matter how long you've been down, and never lose hope.
Love it. To honor our guest then today, it's never lose hope and faith, honoring you and your daughter. Thank you for being with us. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure for sharing what you have. And I look forward, maybe we'll have to find a way to get one of your kids on here and find out what they think of all this crazy. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryan.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.